Hello, I'm David Borys, and welcome to our three-part series on the red-green axis that's confronting our nation today. This series is brought to you by Sharia Crime Stoppers. It's an LLC that I co-founded with Mary Werbicki and Dick Manasari several years ago. Sharia Crime Stoppers was founded to bring factual information to the public about the Islamic threat and to provide training to law enforcement officers about jihadists and the Muslim Brotherhood. To date, we have trained over 1,200 officers throughout the Southeast about this threat. To learn more about Sharia Crime Stoppers and what we do, you can access the United West website or log on to our Monday evening interviews with Leo Holman, Sharam Hayden, Claire Lopez, and Christina Douglas Williams. The social chaos and hysteria facing America is not a spontaneous movement. It is well planned by leaders and promoters of the Marxist Islamic axis, all well funded by globalists and Marxist donors supported by corporate America. This alliance is a marriage of convenience. The red portion of the axis is godless, attempting to establish utopia on earth, while the green portion is led by jihadists and the Muslim Brotherhood, submitting to their God, Allah. They believe God is on their side as they bring Sharia to mankind. Eventually, these two forces will clash. For now, they clash with us and spread chaos and social upheaval throughout our nation. There are several sources for the red-green axis, and we'll just talk about a couple of them here. First, we have the Communist Manifesto, the Antifa Manual, Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, and a document not widely known about, but nonetheless called Prairie Fire, the Weather Underground Strategy to Conduct a Revolution to Overturn American Government, authored by Bernardine Dohrn and Billy Ayers in 1969. Much of this strategy of the Weather Underground has been incorporated into the Democratic Party's presidential platform of 2016 and again this year. Turning now to the other sources of the red-green axis, there is the Quran itself, believed by Muslims to be the exact recorded words of Allah, followed by the recorded words and deeds of Muhammad, which serve as the basis for Islamic law or Sharia. With the exception of the Communist Manifesto, the sources for the red axis were authored by 1960s radicals. So let's now meet some of the men from the grave who are behind the attack on America. First, there's Antonio Gramsci, also known as the godfather of cultural Marxism. He was an Italian communist Marxist sentenced to prison by Mussolini in 1926. There he developed a new strategy to impose Marxism without firing a shot by attacking the institutions of Western capitalism. One of his students was a man known as Rudi Deutsch, a German Marxist socialist of the 1960s and 70s, who said, "We must conduct, quote, a long march through the institutions." There were other German Marxists that preceded Deutsch. One was Herbert Marcuse, along with his colleagues of the Frankfurt School, who fled Nazi Germany in late 1930s and landed at Columbia University at the invitation of John Dewey. He was the author of Repressive Tolerance, or Freedom of Speech, but only for communists, Marxists, socialists, and progressives, who were also immune from any criticism. This laid the groundwork for political correctness and hate speech codes that we see played out today. Another publication of the Frankfurt School was Critical Theory, or the relentless attack on all aspects of Western culture. Its religion, its family, its media, its education, its flags, its rule of law, all designed to make the culture stink. Yet another example of critical theory in action today and the effects to remove statues and historic landmarks from the public square. According to critical theory again, all institutions must be attacked and destroyed, so they can be replaced by cultural Marxist ideology through an insurgency. But before the social Marxists could hope for an insurgency, they needed a proletariat of willing revolutionaries. Remember, the original proletariat envisioned by Marx, the workers, didn't revolt, so Marcuse had to find a group of replacement. So he first turned to the radical students and the baby boomers of the 1960s. He also turned to the Black Power movement and followers, along with young feminists, and finally, gays and liberation transvestites, all integrated in the liberal college classrooms such as Columbia University, the new home of the Frankfurt School. Since then, more groups of victims of so-called white privilege have been added. Illegal immigrants, environmentalists, globalists, and transgender promoters. Collectively, they form the victims of identity politics. This is what intersectionality looks like, a coalition of revolutionary victims who have initiated a new civil war, according to Bill Ayers, under the umbrella of the red-green axis. Returning now to the green portion of the axis, our final historical figure is not dead. Muhammad Akram Adloni. In 1987, he authored the explanatory memorandum on the general strategic goal for the group in North America. It's a plan to wage civilization jihad to replace the United States law with Islamic law or Sharia. The goals of this document are quite straightforward. The Ikhwan must understand that their work in America is a grand jihad in destroying Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their own hands in the hands of believers. Now, what do they mean by their own hands? They're talking about non-Muslims. They're talking about us, public officials, elected officials at all levels of government, providing aid and assistance to what they're trying to do, which is very clearly stated in this statement, so that America is eliminated and God's religion, Allah's religion, is made victorious. And then he went on to say, without this level of understanding, we are not up to the challenge and not prepared for jihad. Akram now is a senior official with the Revolutionary Guards or Al-Quds Force in Iran. All of this is under the banner of the Muslim Brotherhood and their leadership. Note their creed in the center of the slide. Allah is our objective. The Prophet is our leader. The Quran is our law. Jihad is our way. Dying or martyrdom in the way of Allah is our highest hope. The social Marxists and Islamists are in total agreement. Tear America apart and replace it with totalitarian rule. So the funding comes from this man, or much of it, George Soros, who has ties with the Muslim Brotherhood, who pays his protesters money. We saw it played out in Chicago during the original election of Donald Trump in 2016, where activists at Chicago University, following the Muslim Student Association that organized the protests. The MSA was the first Muslim Brotherhood front group established in the United States in 1963. It was supported by MoveOn.org and funded by the Council of American Islamic Relations, an unindicted co-conspirator in the 2009 Holy Land Foundation trial that proved that it was a front group for Hamas. This effort tried to mobilize Black, Latino, and Muslim students through the use of Craigslist and finally joining forces with the Black Lives Matter. One activist of Black Lives Matter was This young lady, Kalia Sabra, close ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, calling for the Black Lives Matter movement to declare jihad in America along with al-Qaeda. Soon thereafter, the Council of American Islamic Relations and its executive director, Nahad Awad, made this statement that Black Lives Matter is our matter. Black Lives Matter is our campaign. This ends part one of our discussion of the red-green axis. To recap, we uncovered the historical sources that provide the doctrinal basis for the insurgency facing America today. Next time, we'll take a close look at the foot soldiers of the movement to overthrow and replace our constitutional republic. Although we'll focus primarily on the Muslim Brotherhood, the Black Lives Matter, and Antifa, remember, there are thousands of useful idiots who support them during their protests and riots. Not to mention the deep state bureaucrats within all levels of government who have tried repeatedly to get rid of Trump since his election in 2016. We invite you now to turn to part two for this information.